United We Om is a 501c3 nonprofit sharing accessible yoga and meditation with trauma-impacted and under-resourced communities. All of our workshops and trainings are offered by donation with no minimum donation. And your donation directly supports our mission of making the benefits of practice available to everyone. Thanks to supporters like you, we've continued to provide practice virtually throughout the pandemic. Learn more and support our work at unitedweom.org. Thank you.
Because an active practice of gratitude is an active recalibration of how we see the world and what we train our brain to look for, right? It's a Tuesday morning, and I'm in the presence of one of the most mind-boggling accomplishments in human history. This thing is so astounding in its complexity and scope. It makes the Panama Canal look like a third grader's craft project. This marvel I see before me is the result of thousands of human beings collaborating across dozens of countries. It took the combined labor of artists, chemists, politicians, mechanics, biologists, miners, packagers, smugglers, and goat herds. It required airplanes, boats, trucks, motorcycles, vans, pallets, and shoulders. It needed hundreds of materials: steel, wood, nitrogen, rubber, silicone, ultraviolet light, explosives. It has caused great joy, but also great poverty and oppression. It relied upon ancient wisdom and space-age technology, freezing temperatures, scorching heat, high mountains, and deep water. It is my morning cup of coffee, and I am grateful for it. Really, really grateful. Thanks 1,000. It's one of my faves. We'll get into this a little bit later. But for a moment, drop a line in the chat bar. What did you think I was going to say? It is my ... PhD research paper, care of Jenny. It is my happiness. Well, yeah, it is my COVID vaccine. Oh my gosh, I totally needed this humor and perspective tonight. It is something bigger than a cup of coffee, right? So I love this book, Thanks 1,000. It's a new book. It's about a year and a half old. Not only do I own Gritty Buddha, the yoga and meditation and enrichment studio, but I own a coffee shop as well. So it strikes a certain chord with me. We actually have that's the first page, the introduction page, written on the wall of our bathroom by a calligrapher. Patricia, I wasn't sure, but I was engaged in figuring it out. What I love so much about this book, admittedly, the author, A.J. Jacobs, right afterwards says, "It wasn't always so. I tend to take things for granted. For most of my life, I rarely thought about my coffee unless it spilled on my jacket or scalded the roof of my mouth. But this last few months have forced me to change that. So just so you know, take a mental note. Thanks 1,000 is the name of the book. It's a quick read. It's like such a quick read. He commits to thanking 1,000 people who are involved in a product he uses daily. And he landed on his morning cup of coffee to inspire the endeavor of unearthing how deep and how far our gratitude can really be expanded and extended if we choose to see. And the last 2 weeks for us together has been, that's what it's been about, seeing. Seeing the minutia around us as blessings, seeing the big around us as blessings, seeing the potholes and the roadblocks and the detours as blessings, and eventually retraining the way we see the world around us. Because an active practice of gratitude is an active recalibration of how we see the world and what we train our brain to look for, right? Shalini, I'm going to send you an image of this first page. Or you can come see me at Karmic Grind and walk into the bathroom where it's painted on the wall by a local artist. So to recap a little bit, week 1, we discussed the epic and vast definition of gratitude. Oh, Lenny, preach, girl. That gratitude is so vast in its definition that really they use the word grateful or gratefulness to define gratitude, and you just can't do that. And scientists and researchers and psychologists have managed to upgrade the definition over and over again as the research has deemed it necessary and valuable and viable to do so. But in its purest, simplest form, the definition of gratitude is so big that it's like to be thankful and grateful for. You're like, that doesn't work. Give me more specifics. And we talked about how it's elusive and intangible, but when it's there, it's so powerful, right? Stephen Covey wrote a book a few years ago, Stephen Covey Jr., so Stephen Covey Sr., The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. Son takes over the company. He writes The Speed of Trust. And I'm just taking a little sidestep. What I love so much about this book in particular, The Speed of Trust, is that he aims to research the intangible and elusive and prove its hard impact. Now, very specifically on the working world, but the working world, like the professional, I have a job, this is my title world, exists everywhere, right? Where do we shed ourselves of the necessary or the necessity of working with others in some way based on our role, right? So the working world professionally in the career sense exists everywhere. When I get letters from Alia's first grade teacher, right? When we navigate the drop-off line, which is like navigating the Crusades. Everywhere we are expressing our role and working with others in some way. So I cite The Speed of Trust because Stephen Covey did research on the power of trust, this elusive, vast, intangible quality, and how it affects the trajectory, the direction, and the speed by which we all come to work together in our roles. And gratitude has very much the same impact. It's like the ether we talked about in the first week. It's everywhere. And you can't quite grab it, but you know when it's there, you know when it's not. One of the lines in The Speed of Trust is that fish find water last. Fish find water last. The very thing that nourishes them, feeds them, holds them up, that they take in their nutrients, right? The air in the water, basically, through their gills. And it's not until they're out of it that they realize what it was doing for them. They find it last. And gratitude has very much a similar effect. Right? So in week 1, we talked about its like vast, vast, vast definition, and that it exists amongst and sometimes in spite of and in addition to life's suffering and challenges. Right? The first of the 4 noble truths, that life is suffering. Put very bluntly, shit's gonna happen. It's gonna go down, right? And that deep definition of happiness and the ancient definition of happiness, which is like gratitude's palm, right? It's two sides of the same appendage. Not pleasure, not like immediate impact, but happiness in Greek. The joy one feels when progressing towards their potential. Right? According to the Dalai Lama, and I'm going to throw up a few books. Another personal favorite, in case you're interested, is the Book of Joy. Another personal favorite, we'll talk, Happiness by Mathieu Ricard. He also wrote Altruism, neuroscientist from France turned Buddhist monk and translator for the Dalai Lama. Just for some inspiration. In the Book of Joy, the Dalai Lama and Desmond Tutu, right, have just this documented discussion on how happiness is unaffected by circumstance. You're like, whoa. Beyond basic human needs, for sure, which we talked about. Maslow's hierarchy of needs, that we need food, air, shelter, water. Once that's satisfied, we need belonging. We need to feel seen and heard and understood, like we have a part. And yes, some circumstances in life will make our mood, our perspective more difficult to hoist up above the line. But generally unaffected by circumstance. In yogic philosophy, santosha, contentment. What I translate to okayness. So last week we talked about all the things that happen when we start to see and actively practice gratitude for the minutia and the massive. What happens to our immune system? What happens to our thoughts, to our resistance and resilience from depression? Do we live longer? Do we make more? Are we okay when we don't? And all the ways that this practice shifts us and gets us to see the world around us. So far we've stacked 2, dare I say, assignments. The first week, 3 blessings. Just every day, sort of scanning the day. What are my blessings? How did they come to me? Now, research and scientists and positive psychologists have landed on gratitude as a definition that includes this clause. that says it's for things beyond our control and creation. And what we talked about last week is like that sense of awe, that gratitude for like this beautiful sunset that you stand before. It's like, oh my gosh. Even, I mean, I'm Sicilian and I hold shoes in contempt. I'd rather be in flip-flops and sweating my face off all day long. But even when you walk outside in the morning on that cold, crisp day and everything looks like it was painted in crystal, it's totally beyond our creation and control. We've all heard that right time, right place phrase. Like, I bumped into this random person who happened to be in the same spot. My husband, my best friend Eleni, my friends Lauren and Nala, the email from Jenny Jared that one day that I didn't miss because I miss a lot of emails beyond my control and creation. And to see those things and to be able to acknowledge those things just landed in your life, helps us upgrade what we talked about as our operating system last week. Right? It's brain training, it's brain conditioning to count your blessings. And what we did last week was to add detail to the things we're saying we're grateful for every day. To add detail. So we level up. So we upgrade our operating system because we're training the brain. This is neuroscience. We're training the brain to look for those things, both big and small, insignificant or seemingly insignificant, and mega. You like that? 1T, not 2. We'll get to that in a few minutes. As we paint detail, which is what we did last week, because we really want to reap the benefits. Dare I say, take advantage of what the practice does for us by boosting our immune system, by increasing our sense of happy emotions. Therefore, it's said, it's research, not just said like conjecture. The people who experience more positive emotions will live up to 7 years longer. Who actively practice gratitude are 20% more generous, 31% more productive, they make 7% more. We can take advantage of that just by training the brain to see. So last week we added detail. There's a concept called hedonic adaptation, that we get used to good things, right? How many times in your life have you heard the new car smell wears off? Enough? Funny, we hear that even when we're not in a new car, right? That phrase transcends an automobile and becomes that like, all good things wear off. Hedonic adaptation, which is why we added detail to our gratitude musings last week. Just enough detail to make what we might acknowledge over and over again new and fresh every time in the brain, as the brain sees it. My example last week was, of course, I'm going to say I'm grateful for my daughters over and over and over again. Of course, I'm grateful for my family over and over again. But each day, what specifically for? all of like 5 days ago, Akasha's hair was finally long enough to put in pigtails. They're hysterical. The kid looks like a total cartoon character. But knowing that and seeing that makes my gratitude for her register as new and fresh. Eleni shared as she's teaching kindergarten, as they go through this practice in her kindergarten class in Kentucky, how the kids start saying, my grandma, my grandma, my grandma, my grandma, every week, my grandma. And Eleni's work is to say, so what about her? So the kids see her as new and fresh in their brain every time they recognize that they're grateful for her. Now, this foundation, I mean, many of you have taken education with me before. I never get sick of like pouring the concrete that everything else is built on. So I'm going to open up for a minute. And anyone who's been doing the work for the last 2 weeks, and I hope till forever after, not to intimidate you and make it look like this long, steep uphill climb that you now have to embark on, right? Because there was a day that you didn't brush your teeth, right? And then there was a moment that brushing your teeth became habit. You never had to think about it again. You know, people didn't brush their teeth until like daily until like the 50s. Can you believe that? Can you believe that? Let's talk about that for a second. There was like fuzz in people's mouths, no joke. And I am not ashamed or embarrassed to tell you this story. So freaking gross. We didn't feel a need. The fuzz and that feeling was not, I know Jenny's like got her tongue over her teeth, was not awful or awkward enough to inspire the habit. It wasn't until toothpaste companies started adding just a touch of fluoride that would make their mouth feel fuzzy and bubbly. And that positive feeling was enough to turn brushing teeth into a habit. It wasn't the negative feeling of having fuzz on your teeth and like really stinky breath. It was the positive feeling, the bubbling and the fizz that turned what took effort and thinking about every few days into a daily, mindless, automated, right? Operating system, automated. I never have to consider this act again, act. So forgive me if I just positioned gratitude as a lifelong act, right? I hope forever after you do this in some way. I hope that there's a moment that you don't have to think about doing it because it is so built in to the fabric, the habits, the operating system of who you are, that you are just seeing the world through this prescription lens. Until then, we do the work. We added detail last week, so I digress. If anyone has done the work for the last 2 weeks, I'd love to open this up for an insight, or a moment of like, hey, I learned this, I saw this, this surprised me, before we move on. Jenny, and then Eleni. Jenny, then Eleni.
So I have been, and I shared with you, Regina, how revitalizing it's been for me. And then I had, an opportunity from the universe to experience that I guess gratitude in its specificity kind of has no depth. And without getting like anecdotal, a lot of you know I have these chickens. I love these chickens so much. I have new chickens, little babies. They are my babies. And a lot of every night we've been doing it as a family. What are you grateful for? Who did you care for? And like, I have to force myself to say somebody. other than the chickens, because that's been like a real practice for me. And then yesterday I came home from school and a little fox had come and taken 2 of my little chickens. And today was my first day with my flock without these 2. And I was so shocked by this kind of like even deeper level of gratitude I had for those 5 that were there, and that I saw them each as even more special in their own little way. And I was surprised at how I was able to handle the loss of the other 2, in terms of acknowledging that, like, and speaking with my children about how, like, the fox needs to eat too, and we're the fox a lot of the time. And it was just a really different way to experience loss. And I know that I would not have processed that without these tools. And it reminds me of, like, Ram Dass always says, like, we have 2 great gifts in life, and they're love and death. And for me, this gratitude practice kind of let me get in that corner, that I haven't really been able to feel through. So
Mhm. Thanks for sharing that, Jenny. There's some like real research out there on gratitude and grief and gratitude and anxiety right now that's couldn't have been captured by all the numbers you could possibly throw out better than an anecdote like that. Thank you. All right, Eleni, and then Sean.
I think, I feel like I'm always grateful, but these last couple weeks, or I just it's crazy right now for everybody. Like, I know I'm not unique. I don't, like, when I speak about it, I think it's so funny because we're all in some sort of way living a sense of elevated anxiety. It's different for everybody. But I noticed after that first week, I noticed that I wasn't feeling as tired, and I noticed that I wasn't feeling as many like aches and pains, and I noticed that I had more energy to like keep going through my work day with my kid, like just nonstop. And when I noticed it, and I noticed how much I was getting done and how little I was letting things bother me, the common denominator was that we had started this practice together, this more conscious, focus, the specificity, I was it kind of blew me away that I felt it physically, because I definitely have felt the anxiety. And like the last couple of weeks, I've just been like looking around like, I got this, like, and so it's definitely something that I need to make a priority, uh, because it's just the domino, the ripple effect, the waves that it creates are so beneficial.
It reminds me, last week we talked about the definition of well-being, and it was like super lame. So lame. Hold on, I wrote it. Comfortable, healthy, and happy. Wah, wah. That is so lame. And Lauren spoke up and said, I feel like it's like alive. Like well-being is feeling alive. And alive is also those things: energized, resilient, bounce back. You can handle what life gives you.
Yeah. And just one more thing is about my kids. I feel like as a teacher, I talk a lot. So it's so important to me to instill that in them. And I feel like I've done a lot of talking to him about it. And so that was another realization. Like, if I'm living this, I need to say less, because he'll see it, he'll feel it,
The intangible. Okay, one more, Sean, and then we're going to transition this and really next level apply it.
I'll try and be quick. I think, as the gratitude, has it become like a commercial? Has it lost its truth? I look on seems like a commercial venture that seeing, well, the gratitude is added as a tip, to a restaurant bill. And obviously I offer share gratitude practices, and I see the evidence, that says that obviously gratitude. So I share the opportunity to express gratitude, but my thought process, is it a real truth? So my own thing is my own resistance to gratitude. I think I brought it up last week or the other week, and how do you work on it being a true gratitude, I guess, for yourself and for the clients that you share, but maybe that's a longer topic for another time, but that is one of the things that I struggle with, the heartfelt gratitude, I guess.
For sure, it's a buzzword right now. Happiness has been used more in the last 10 years than in like the 500 before, just as a word, right? So for sure, there's an element of like losing its luster or sheen because you hear it everywhere and it's thrown around as buzzwords. And at the same time, maybe we're just becoming more aware of what the sages and the deities and the ancient texts on ethics and humanity and compassion have always been saying. Right? You can research the Buddha's words, and you can do a search in my favorite Bible app is called YouVersion for the word thanks or gratitude and even meditation, and you'd be blown away by how many times it's cited and referenced. These are like the books, like the ancient books, the like Indiana Jones went searching for, and they've been like tapping us on the shoulder for centuries. Why don't you listen to this? Now maybe resistance is the next series we lead. All right. There's a great book. I'm just going to cite this too. Sean, you might love this. It's called The War of Art. Not the Art of War, The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield, who is an author. And the whole thing is on the concept of resistance to the very things that would put us out there, that would light us up, that would make us believe, that would make us better. So put that in the parking lot. But I love that you bring that up because it for sure is totally commercialized. We hear it everywhere. And how do we sift? But the Buddha said, like, I will teach you everything I know. I'll share it all. Here it all is. This is what I've learned. Now go test it. Don't accept it or believe it as truth until you experience it as truth. Hence the practices. Right? The Buddha didn't want to convince you. I call him Sid, my buddy Sid. He didn't want to convince you. He didn't need to. He knew truth through experience, through practice, through highs and lows and grit, through like being a total derelict, through his drug trips, through like hanging out in the woods with a bunch of hoodlums. Like he tried and tested until he found truth to apply. And then he just shared it with everyone he could. And then said, now you test until you find truth in this or not. Hence these practices. So I want to disclaimer this next segment that there was research presented by Berkeley. There was research presented by UC Berkeley that for 3 weeks had individuals write brief notes of gratitude for things that entered their life, that were gifted to them, that were given to them, like beyond their control. 3 months later, the effects in the brain, the positive effects in the brain were still there. And here's the kicker. They were felt whether the letter was sent or delivered or not. The brain was rewired whether you actually delivered this note to someone, this message to someone, that, hey, I'm really grateful for you for doing this specific thing that affected me in this way. Didn't matter. Getting it out was what created the upgrade. However, Christopher McCandless, Into the Wild, if anyone remembers the story, made famous his last line before he passed away of starvation. Happiness is only real when it's shared. Hemingway, no man is an island unto himself. Anthropologists say we are pack animals. Now, by default, our own personal upgrades elevate the world around us. By default, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate, but that we are powerful beyond measure. It is, we ask, who am I, right? Who are you not to be? So by default, we do the work. Somehow, we take the world around us with us. But then, what if we override the default and apply? Right? And apply and really learn to share in all the small, subtle, and big ways how we feel. What would happen? In Buddhist, mind science is the way my meditation teacher puts it, Buddhist mind science. He's also a doctor of psychiatry, care of Harvard, and lectures in Buddhist studies at Columbia. So he calls it Buddhist mind science, philosophy, science. Metta, two T's, metta, shared, expressed loving kindness and compassion. The same thing that you've been doing when you sit down at the end of the day or at the start of the day, or when you have 2.5 minutes in the bathroom alone without your kids. I don't know when you're doing it. I'm totally speaking for a friend. And writing enough detail to make a specific new imprint on the brain, even about the things that we feel immense gratitude for daily. What if ever so often we shared it? So we're going to pull another page out of Sean Acor's book because he is one of my favorite researchers. I'm not a researcher. I'm a storyteller, and I am a detective, but I'm certainly not a researcher. So a nod to Sean Acor. I don't care if it's on your phone in notes, or if you are like super old school, like I am, carrying around 4 different journals in one book bag. What am I doing with all of this paper on my back? Like what is the symbolism of the fact that I carry 3 books and at least 2 journals next to my computer in my book bag every day? And yes, I'm a grown-ass woman who can't separate from her book bag. What is it saying? But I don't care if you're pen and paper, if you are like obsessive with your notes, I do love, for sure, Eleanor, I love a pen. The written word. The written word. Double down is the concept. So if you've got it, however you're going to express it, we're going to take the next 2.5 minutes to write a message to someone. I don't care if you send it or not, because the effects of on the brain will be there anyway. And I don't care if you send it tonight, unless you're putting it in a text and you start writing this as a text right now, ready to send. But take a moment, sit back, sit up, feel that pen or that device, I don't care what it is, in your hand close by, and think like, who is it that needs to know, that doesn't know, that I haven't told? How their presence in my life it does something, and it does something good, and it's done something good. Who needs to know? And we are going to take the next 2 minutes to just start scribbling.
May you have auspiciousness and causes of success. May you have the confidence to always do your best. May you take no effort in your being generous, sharing what you can, nothing more, nothing less. May you know the meaning of the word happiness. May you always lead from the beating in your chest. May you be treated like an esteemed guest. May you get to rest, may you catch your breath. May the best of your todays be the worst of your tomorrows. Whoa. May the road less paved be the road that you follow. Oh. Well, here's to the hearts that you're gonna break. Here's to the lives that you're gonna change. Here's to the infinite possible ways to love you. I want you to have it. Here's to the good times we're gonna have. You don't need money, you got a free pass. Here's to the fact that I'd be sad without you. I want you to have it all. As a slap bracelet, may you keep the chaos and the clutter off your desk. May you have unquestionable health and less stress, having no possessions though immeasurable wealth. May you get a gold star on your next test. May your educated guesses always be correct, and may you win prizes shining like diamonds. May you really own it each moment to the next. May the best of your todays be the worst of your tomorrows. Whoa. May the road less paved be the road that you follow. Oh. Well, here's to the hearts that you're gonna break. Here's to the lives that you're gonna change. Here's to the infinite possible ways to love you. I want you to have it. Here's to the good times we're gonna have. You don't need money, you got a free pass. Here's to the fact that I'd be sad without you. I want you to have it all. Can imagine, oh, no matter what your path is, if you believe it, then anything can happen. Go, 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 raise your glasses, go, 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 you can have
If you're not done yet, let's take another moment or two to step away from the vehicle. We then just let the eyes close and capture, like really notice whatever the feeling is. Just notice what it feels like to get that out of your heart and your head and put it somewhere. And when you're ready, drop a line in the chat bar. Just a word or two about how it feels. Hmm. Lucky, life force, relief and lifted, happy, relieved, warm, lighter in spirit, connected. I have arrived. You are here, alive. I feel very like nervous and vulnerable. Like, wow, this person needs to know. And I don't think they know how much they carry me, how much I need to be carried. I heard once that the most powerful poem that Muhammad Ali ever said was me, we. 2 words. By default, by default, when we engage in the conditioning, the practice of gratitude, and not gratitude only for the beautiful days, gratitude for the minutia in the hard days. There's gratitude when we're weary, was a word Eleni used in the first week that still sits with me. Gratitude in grief and loss. By default, we take the world around us with us for the ride. You feel more positive emotions. You walk into a room. It's called an emotional contagion. It's contagious, not like COVID, a much more positive way. We can't help but interface with the world around us in a new way and take it with us. We are pack animals. We are wired for connection. Our habits that affect our mood and our ways of being by default, like spew and sprinkle in the world around us. And then we really level up when we start to express it intentionally. So for the next 7 days, I won't see you again on Thanksgiving unless you're here virtually. Gritty Buddha's 4th anniversary is Thanksgiving morning. We open on Thanksgiving morning, 2016. So unless you're here and you log in for practice that morning, it's been donation every year. And although we're limited to 8 students physically in the studio, we will figure out our way to make a larger impact. If you're here that Thursday in a week, we'll have a little nod to this too. It'll be like our unofficial follow. But if you're not, the ask is for the next 7 days, 2 minutes. 2 minutes. I didn't even get to finish that great song. Jason Mraz, by the way, have it all. 2 minutes. Type an email, a text, put it in your notes, write it on a card. Thank you for doing this. Thank you for being this. This ... specific. Because it means this ... to me. Send it or don't. But I'd be curious. I'd be really curious to hear what that simple 2-minute act does for others in your life who have probably done so much for you and they have no idea. The high tide lifts all ships. So you can count your blessings. You can add some detail. So you override the brain's mechanism that makes the new car smell fade. And you share it in some simple 2-minute way, not even a song. By text, by email, by thank you note. Maybe it's someone that you need to like just write it and burn it. So you have permission not to send it. You will still feel next level brain gains. However, I'd be really curious to know, to hear, and for you to feel. Yeah, thank you, Sean. What it's like to just intentionally give it. So we have an extra, really precise, it's 6:57. We budgeted 20 minutes for additional dialogue, questions, comments, insights. I look forward so much to the next 20 minutes of my night. You have no idea. I learned so much from the last 2 weeks of people's shares, and it has carried me through moments. I was asked, this is going to be my closing 2 minutes before we go into that. I was asked to name this season or chapter of my life. It was like this really cool little challenge. Name this chapter of your life. You know, you open a book and it's like, dun, dun, dun. The book doesn't make that sound, but it's a new chapter. And I named the chapter, this chapter of my life, The Valley. By all definitions of the word, I live in Locust Valley. I live in the lowest point of Locust Valley, like literally in the marshes of the valley. It's been the lowest period of my life. I learned in this season of my life that I've never been worse. I used to be able to say I've been better, I've been worse. This season, I actually never experienced worse. And it took me a moment of reflection, like, whoa, I can't say that anymore. But I was at dinner with friends, and it was a courtyard dinner outside. And the sommelier comes over to, it's like late in the meal. So there's been a wine pairing, and now you're later in the meal and they can go a little wild. He goes, grapes can either be grown on the hillside or the valley floor. So on the hillside, they get the sun, it's really beautiful. They often get some altitude. They're sweeter. The valley floor, you can imagine the wine is so much richer because all the nutrients, all the good hits the hill and goes down to the valley. And therefore it creates the most complex, robust, nourished grapes, and therefore wine. Now, listen, I'm at a dinner table with really great people, and I'm like, just fight. It means so much more than like having this delicious wine. This season of my life is the valley. It's the lowest point I've ever experienced. And yet, it's where all the nutrients is flowing downhill. Gratitude exists within, throughout, amongst, in the face of, in spite of, alongside. All of life's highs and lows. You've made this month, this very hard month, where I'm celebrating an anniversary in a business that is empty, by force, exponentially better for me. Thank you.